Welcome to the Podkey summary of Use SwiftUI with AppKit and UIKit from WWDC 2026. A lot of this week's story is about how Apple keeps making the line between AppKit, UIKit, and SwiftUI less dramatic than people assume. The big theme is incremental adoption, automatic observation. SwiftUI views and scenes dropped into old apps, even menus and gesture recognizers crossing the boundary cleanly. And maybe the clearest example is a custom circular color picker built with Canvas, where new SwiftUI pieces can still reuse older drawing code and the same shared model. The headline feature here is the @observable macro, because it takes a lot of the old bookkeeping out of UI code. If you mark a Swift class with @observable, its mutable properties are tracked automatically, and any view that reads those properties gets redrawn when they change. So in the AppKit world, you don't have to keep manually poking controls with needs, display every time state changes, which is one of those chores nobody misses. What's especially useful is that this observation is not limited to draw. It also works in lifecycle methods like update, constraints, layout, and update, layer plus the UIKit equivalents. So updates can happen naturally during layout and rendering passes. V8 pushes this pretty broadly too, across things like buttons and collection view cells, which means the pattern is meant to be used all over the place, not just in one demo-friendly corner. Apple also made this more practical for real apps by letting observation tracking be enabled on older OS versions through info.plist flags. On macOS, you use NS observation tracking enabled, and on iOS, it's UI observation tracking enabled. That means you can get this automatic syncing on macOS 15 and iOS 18 without waiting for the newest cycle everywhere. Then starting with the 2026 releases, it's just on by default, which is exactly how these platform shifts usually become normal. First a flag, then one day it's just the air you breathe. From there, the integration story is refreshingly low drama. If you already have an AppKit app, you can wrap a SwiftUI view in an NS Shosting view and place it directly in the existing view hierarchy with almost no glue code. Because NS Shosting view is still an NS view, it behaves like a native citizen for layout and event handling. And the nice part is, you can keep using the same @observable model on both sides. So this doesn't have to be a rewrite project disguised as a migration plan. It's more like replacing one room at a time instead of tearing down the house. The custom color picker is a good example of where that approach pays off. The proposal is to move away from plain linear hue, saturation, and brightness sliders and use a circular design instead. A hue ring on the outside, 2 inner semicircles for saturation and brightness, and a preview circle in the center. That whole control is built in SwiftUI with Canvas, which works a lot like immediate mode drawing in AppKit or UIKit. Every redraw gives you a fresh graphics context, and inside that closure, you can do the familiar drawing work: strokes, fills, transforms, filters, all the usual visual plumbing. And if you've already got older core graphics drawing code with CG, context lets you call it from inside Canvas. So legacy routines don't have to be thrown out just because the wrapper is new. That's a pretty friendly path into SwiftUI for custom controls, especially when the redesign itself is the moment you were going to touch the UI anyway. The bridge goes beyond views too. With NS Gesture Recognizer, representable, an existing NS Gesture Recognizer subclass can be exposed to SwiftUI and attached with the regular .gesture modifier alongside native SwiftUI gestures. The example here is a force-click recognizer, which is neat but also realistically limited because not every device supports force-click. So the same action is also offered through a SwiftUI menu item with a keyboard shortcut, which is a very practical bit of design instead of pretending everybody uses the same hardware. Menus get their own bridge as well with NS Shosting menu. You can take a SwiftUI view containing a button, even one wrapped in with animation, put it inside an NS Shosting menu, and it becomes a full NS menu while still preserving normal menu properties like a title. That menu item can then live in the app's main NS menu with a keyboard shortcut and animated state changes, which is one of those small demos that quietly says a lot about how mature the mixing has become. The same incremental idea shows up at the scene level. NS hosting scene representation can wrap a SwiftUI scene like a menu bar extra and insert it dynamically from an existing NS application delegate during application will finish launching. So even a legacy AppKit app can add modern SwiftUI scene features without changing its whole structure. There's also a setting scene pattern where an app IBA action can call the open settings environment action, letting users toggle the menu bar extra from the app settings flow, while the older AppKit foundation stays in place. Maybe the biggest meta point is that Apple is already living this hybrid model internally. Controls like NSS Lighter, NS Switch, and NSS Segmented Control are now rendered using SwiftUI under the hood, with large chunks of implementation shared across macOS, iOS, and iPadOS. Even the liquid glass visual language showing up across the system is built on SwiftUI. So the message here isn't that AppKit suddenly disappears tomorrow. It's that Apple keeps moving functionality into shared SwiftUI-based layers, while still giving developers on older codebases ways to adopt it, piece by piece, which is much less dramatic and a lot more usable. Taken together, this all feels less like a platform handoff and more like a steadily widening bridge. If you've got a mature AppKit app, there are now a lot of places to start small. Observation, a hosted view, a menu, a scene, maybe one very fancy color picker. And honestly, if a UI migration can begin with better colors and less manual redraw code, that's a pretty decent deal. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.